Session 1, Introduction to Agile. Session 2, Agile Manifesto or Principles. Session 3, that is today's session, Scrum Framework, Session 1. Scrum Framework, Session 1. So today, agenda of the session, next 1 hour, I'll be explaining you Scrum Framework, Introduction, Scrum Framework, Introduction. So what is Scrum? What is Scrum? What happens in Scrum? So Scrum Framework, Session 1. You can take it as a Session 1. So by end of the today's session, you will be learning objectives. End of the today's session, learning objectives are end of the today's session, learning objectives are number 1. End of the today's session, learning objectives are number 1. What is Scrum? Relationship with Agile. 2. What are the components of Scrum? What are the components of Scrum? What is Scrum? Relationship with Agile. What are the components of Scrum? What are the components of Scrum? And Scrum roles discussion. Scrum roles discussion. So this is what the today learning objective. So Scrum definition. What is the Scrum definition? So what exactly mean by Scrum? So let me give you. See guys, for understanding the Scrum, the better material is Scrum Guides. So Scrum Guide, just you type Scrum Guide. Scrum Guide. I'll be giving the URL in the chart. So go to this URL, the better material for understanding the Scrum. So go to here, Scrum Guides. Scrum Guide, this is the official Scrum Guide, even you can open. Official Scrum Guide, even you can open. So what exactly Scrum is? So Scrum is, if someone asks you, Scrum is an agile practice or agile process framework. Agile process framework. Scrum is an agile practice or agile process framework. So Scrum is an agile practice or agile process framework. So Scrum is an agile practice or process framework which deliver business value, which deliver product increment every 2 to 4 weeks with 3 to 9 members team. Agile Scrum is an agile practice or Agile process framework which deliver product increment. Product increment is nothing but software. Software every 2 to 4 weeks with a 3 to 9 members team. So Scrum, they have given many definitions. So they have given many definitions in the Scrum guide. So Scrum is a framework, like so Scrum is a process framework. So Scrum is a process framework that has been used to manage work on the complex products since early 1990s. So Scrum is a process framework. Scrum is a process framework that has been used to manage work on the complex products since the last 20 years. Okay, so Scrum, first of all, we have to discuss Scrum components, then you will easily understand the Scrum. So we have to discuss Scrum components, and Scrum is not a methodology, Scrum is not a technology, Scrum is not a tool, so Scrum is a process framework. So Scrum is a process framework. It is not a methodology. So Scrum is a method. It is not a methodology. It is a process framework. It is a process framework, or you can call it as agile practice. You can call it as an agile practice. Let me show you Scrum definition. Yeah. So to implement Agile Manifesto, there are many frameworks which are similar to Scrum. So one is Scrum. There is open unified process, feature-driven development, stream programming, essential unified process. There are many other frameworks like Scrum. There are many other frameworks like Scrum. So Scrum is one of the Agile method or one of the Agile practice. Scrum is one of the Agile method or Agile practice. So Scrum, like so this is the diagram which explains you the Scrum framework. We'll be understanding this complete diagram and framework in today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow sessions. So in Scrum framework, these are the components. So logically, Scrum framework components are roles. Here you can see roles, ceremonies or events, artifacts, roles, ceremonies, artifacts. So there are 4 components of Scrum framework. You need to understand. If you want to learn about Scrum framework, you need to understand Scrum roles. Who will be participated in the Scrum projects? Scrum events. What are the ceremonies of Scrum? Then Scrum artifacts. Scrum artifacts. Scrum artifacts. And fourth one, Scrum rules. Scrum rules. So these are the 4 things you need to understand. Okay, so as I told, so understanding Scrum rules, events, artifacts, rules. At a Scrum Master level, it will take 50 hours. So so that 50 hours training I have to explain in 3 hours at a team member level. So you will gain next 3 hours Scrum framework knowledge at a team member level. So after this, you may not directly try for Scrum Master kind of thing, but you will be gaining some knowledge on the team member level kind of knowledge. So logically, Scrum roles, events, artifacts. So what are the roles of the Scrum? Product owner, Scrum Master, Scrum team. So there are 3 roles. 3 roles. Product owner, Scrum Master, Scrum development team. So before I explain these 3 roles, I'll explain you high level the entire Scrum diagram. I'll explain you what happens in an end-to-end sprint, end-to-end Scrum. So you are working in a Scrum project, which is an Agile practice. You have chosen Scrum as a Agile practice for your project. So what happens in Scrum? The very first step, there is a role called product owner role. There is a role called product owner role. So product owner is a business representative. Product owner is a business representative. Product owner is a business representative. So dedicated to this project, he is a business representative. One side, product owner is coordinating stakeholders, end users, key users, business, product management. Other side, product owner is coordinating Scrum development team, and so the work we are delivering. So product owner act as a bridge between business and delivery team. Product owner act as a bridge between business and delivery team. So product owner is a business representative. Product owner is a business representative. So whenever, let's say you are you are working in a Scrum project as a Scrum development team member, like developer or tester or operations guy, you are working in a Scrum development team. Then if you are working in a Scrum development team, to whom you need to coordinate with the business, because what Agile says, Agile encourages more discussions, more collaboration, more teamwork. Scrum obviously it has to follow that. That's why in Scrum Framework, we have a dedicated role called product owner. So product owner major responsibility is product is a business representative, and he is the product backlog management. So I'm introducing a word called product backlog. What is the product owner job? So product owner job is product backlog management. What do you mean by product backlog management? So product backlog management means, so in Scrum projects, like product owner ensures product backlog has enough product backlog items. What is product backlog? So product backlog, this is my product backlog. So what is product backlog? Product backlog means list of desired work. Product backlog means list of desired work, list of desired and ordered work, list of desired and ordered work expressed by business, list of desired and ordered work expressed by business to be developed in future iterations, to be developed in future sprints. So here I am introducing one more word called sprint. Okay. So we started with number one. So product owner is a business representative. Everyone is clear. So what is the job of the product owner? The product owner job is what is the job of the product owner? Product owner job is, okay. So product owner job is product backlog management. What is product backlog management? What is product backlog first? Product backlog means list of desired work expressed by the business. So list of desired work expressed by the business. So what work business is expressing, business is expecting. So list of desired work expressed by the business, list of desired work expressed by the business, it is called basically product backlog. So generally the so we call it as a product backlog items. Product backlog items are nothing but simply requirements. Product backlog items are nothing but simply requirements. So product backlog items are simply requirements. So product backlog items are nothing but simply requirements. So product backlog items are nothing but simply requirements. So requirements. So how product backlog items are expressed in your Scrum projects? So we call it as epics, user stories or story cards, epics, user stories or story cards, spikes, So product backlog items are nothing but requirements. So if you are working in a traditional software development, you will be having business requirements, functional requirements, non-functional requirements. Like that, you will be having the list of the requirements given by BA. Here, product owner and his supporting team, that could be BA or developers, so they comes up with set of requirements in the form of product backlog, and product backlog items are called epics, user stories, spikes. So if you are working in any Scrum project, so requirement word generally we won't use. Requirements are expressed in user stories. Requirements are expressed in user stories. So requirements word we won't use. Okay, so requirements word, we generally the word requirement we won't use. So we use a word called user story. So what are the user stories? How to write user stories also I'll be guiding you. First today I wanted to explain high level end-to-end Scrum you are going to learn today. Detailed explanation I'll be giving tomorrow and after tomorrow session also. So step one. So one, product owner is a business representative. He and his supporting team comes up with the product backlog. Product backlog contains set of user stories. Set of user stories and epics. So these are the three different categories of requirements in Scrum project. Here, one interesting word is, okay, if you look at the definition of product backlog, list of desired and ordered work. Ordered means remember in Scrum projects, in Scrum projects, business decides order of user stories or requirements. Order of user stories are requirements. User story is nothing but a simple requirement in Agile projects or Scrum project. Okay. Whereas in extreme programming, if you work in extreme, this is another Agile method. If you are working in Agile extreme programming, developers decides order of user stories. One interesting point, both follow Agile methodology. So both follow Agile methodology. But in Scrum project, business decides order of user stories. In extreme programming projects, developers decide order of user stories. In Scrum projects, business decides order of user stories. In extreme programming projects, developers decides order of user stories. In Scrum project, business decides order of user stories. In extreme project, programming, then developers. So both are Agile, but the way they're implementing the rules, roles, events. So the procedure is different, the framework is different, but all these are inheriting their Agile principles, methodology, but the way how they operate is daily, and the daily practice is different. So in Scrum, one interesting point is always in which order we have to deliver the increment, in which order we have to deliver the increment, in which order we have to deliver increment. So this would be decided by business team, and as a business team representative, product owner decides this. So if you are working in a Scrum projects, so product backlog management means, so ranking of user stories. User stories is nothing but a simple requirement. I will show you. So ranking of user stories, like ordering of prioritizing user stories, So prioritizing user stories, ranking of user stories, prioritizing user stories, ordering user stories, ranking of user stories, prioritizing, ordering. Okay, in which order? So because see, in which order we have to deliver. So what are the top 10 user stories? So if business decides to optimize business value. To optimize business value. That means, so if they decide in which order they want, so they have to think, okay, so if these 10 stories delivered in the first iteration, then so we'll get more return on investment when compared to next series of stories. So that thought process, that analysis will be done by business team, product owner, and product owner supporting system. So this is the second step. So what if you come to a basic diagram of understanding Scrum? The first step, product owner is a business representative. Product owner defines user stories or requirements. Product owner defines user stories or requirements. Once the product backlog is ready, so product backlog is the main input for your like development, entire work planning. So product backlog is the main input. So product backlog is ready. And one more important point here. So no need to define 100% product. So product backlog evolves throughout the project. Product backlog evolves throughout the project. No need to define product backlog upfront for entire project. So no need to define product backlog. No need to define product backlog upfront for entire project. Product backlog upfront for entire project. So product backlog, no need to define product backlog upfront for entire project. So product backlog evolves throughout the project. So no need to define product backlog upfront for entire project. Product backlog evolves throughout the project. Product backlog evolves throughout the project. So once the initial product backlog, the word I use, initial product backlog is ready, then the third step. So once we have the product backlog is ready, let list of simple requirements we have. Once we have the list of the requirements here, the third step. So the third step is, so all these product backlog items we are delivering in series of iteration. That iteration in Agile, in Scrum project, we call it as a sprint. As per Scrum, the third step is, so we'll be delivering in iterations. So we'll be delivering in iterations. So iteration means, so in Scrum project, iteration is sprint. First we'll start with the sprint 1. So what is sprint here? What is sprint? Sprint is a new word. So sprint is a new word. So sprint means what exactly mean by sprint? So sprint means, I wanted to show you the Scrum guide as well. So sprint means, so the heart of the Scrum is a sprint. So you need to understand what exactly sprint is. Okay, so the discussion is important. The heart of the Scrum is a sprint. So sprint is a time box of 1 month or less, during which a done, usable, and potentially releasable product increment is created. What happens during the sprint? Sprint is a time box. Generally, when we had Agile discussions yesterday and day before yesterday, so we have used a word called iteration. In Scrum projects, we call that iteration as a sprint. So sprint is a time box of 1 month or less. You can have 1 week sprint, 1.5 week sprint, 2 weeks sprint, 3 weeks sprint. So sprint is a time box of 1 month or less. And what happens during the sprint? Sprint is a time box. What happens during the sprint? So which is a done, usable, and potentially releasable product increment is created. Done, usable, and potentially releasable product increment is created. Okay, so what happens during the sprint? Done. What do you mean by done? Done means, so in our Scrum projects, okay, so to say sprint is complete, or sign off, to give sprint complete, to say sprint is complete, there is a criteria called definition of done criteria will be defined. So what is definition of done criteria? So it's a like so sprint. Many of us has a one perception saying that completing means if testing is done, then we can say if testing is done, then we can say the work is done. No. So what really business is expecting as a definition of done? So let's say code reviews must be done. So definition of done criteria may be code reviews must be completed, unit testing must be completed. Okay, all open defects are discussed. All open defects are discussed, and let's say training materials has prepared or documentation prepared. So definition of done is play very important role. So what is the sprint definition? So what is the sprint definition? Sprint means a time box of 1 month or less during which a done during which a done usable and potentially releasable product increment is created. Potentially releasable product increment is created. So this is the definition of sprint. So in actual work happens in the sprint only. Actual work happens in the sprint only. So actual work happens during the sprint only. So every sprint what happens? Every sprint what happens? So every sprint starts with sprint planning, and every sprint the sprint implementation. So every sprint implementation. So every sprint starts with sprint planning. So every sprint we go with the sprint implementation. Sprint implementation. Every sprint starts with sprint planning, sprint implementation. Daily scrum happens. Sprint reviews happens. Sprint retrospective meeting happens. So sprint retrospective. So every sprint, the purpose of the sprint is delivering software or increment of software which is 100% tested. Or the simple way of explaining, which has met definition of done criteria. Definition of done criteria. So every sprint, what happens in the sprint? So sprint starts with sprint planning, sprint implementation happens, daily scrum happens. Okay, so daily scrum happens, review happens, retrospective happens. Yes. So we have a question from Sushma. What is retrospective? Yes, Sushma. I have not started that discussion. Only 3 points explained, guys. No need to confuse. Only 3 points explained. What is the first point? Product owner is a business representative. He creates initial product backlog. Let me write down also so that it is easy. So 3 steps only I have explained. Okay, so no need to confuse. Every point will be covered. 3 steps only I have explained. What is the first point? Product owner is a business representative who defines initial product backlog. So product owner is a business representative who defines initial product backlog. That is point number 1. Product owner is a business representative who defines initial product backlog. That is point number 1. Point number 2. Okay, so point number 2. Product backlog contains ordered list of product backlog items. Ordered list of product backlog items. Product backlog items are expressed in product backlog items are expressed in epics, user stories, spikes, and so on. So what are epics, what are user stories, what are the spikes? I'll be showing you in tomorrow's session. It's just an expression of requirement in Scrum project. It's a simple requirement. So those requirements I'll be showing you in tomorrow class. So third one, once we have the product backlog. So product increments in Scrum projects happens in series of sprints. Sprint is a time box. What is sprint? Sprint is a time box. So sprint is a time boxed event. Sprint is a time boxed event. It can be maximum of the sprint you can plan up to 1 month. 2 weeks sprint, 3 weeks sprint, 4 weeks sprint you can plan. So in which every sprint starts with sprint planning, daily Scrum, sprint implementation happens, sprint reviews, sprint retrospectives. So these are the few important activities or ceremonies which happens during the sprint. So sprint starts with sprint planning. And so once we give the demo, customers will give us the feedback. So what exactly happens during the sprint will be understanding from fourth point. So the work we do in Scrum projects will be delivered in series of sprints. Work we do during the Scrum projects will be delivered in series of sprints. Work we do in Scrum projects will be delivered in series of sprints. Work we do in Scrum projects will be delivered in series of sprints. So every sprint is a time-boxed calendar of 1 month where we do from planning to deployment. So what exactly happens during the sprint we'll be discussing now. So these are the only 3 points I've explained. So these are the 3 points we have explained till now. Product owner is a business representative. Product backlog contains ordered list of requirements, and product increments happens in the series of the sprints. So we have a question from Pradhan. Can you please light on product owner versus product manager versus project manager, which is the product life cycle? Yeah, so Pradhan, this is not the objective to discuss that one. We'll discuss. You write an email, I'll get back to you. Okay, so I'll send you my answer, and we have a separate session. We are discussing basic Scrum because there are very new people in this room, so they don't know what is Scrum. If I start discussion on this, they will deviate. So sorry for not able to answer your question because it is not context driven. I have a question from Ridhita Banerjee. Can you please explain definition of done? Yeah, very good. So it is related to today's topic. So what do you mean by definition of done? So every sprint outcome validated as per definition of done criteria agreed by both business and development team. So to say sprint is complete, code review completed, unit testing completed, system testing completed, results are analyzed. Okay, so all the defects are closed. Open defects, any open defect, discuss any open defect or pending work, discussed with product owner, any documentation required, which is created. So if yours when business team consider the sprint is over, when business team is considered the sprint is over, if these points are true, code review completed, unit testing completed, okay, system testing completed, all defects are closed. So this is sample definition of done criteria. So Ridhita Banerjee, so every sprint we start, I mean before starting of the sprint, we will start with a common a sample a agreed definition of done. End of the sprint, business validates, product owner, stakeholders validates the work is completed as per the definition of done or not. Hope it is clear, Ridhita Banerjee. Right. So let's move on to the fourth point. So if we're trying to understand high level what exactly Scrum, what happens in the Scrum. First step, everyone is clear. Second step is clear. Third step. So now, so you understand what is sprint, but what exactly happens in the sprint? You understand what is sprint, but what exactly happens during the sprint? So what exactly happens during the sprint? So we are going to understand what exactly happens during the sprint. So we need to understand what exactly happens during the sprint. Okay, so every sprint, okay, now let me tell you. So in our product backlog, we have, so let me write a problem statement. So in our product backlog, we have n number of stories. We have n number of stories. So out of these stories, we have n number of stories. Out of these stories, how many stories we have in our product backlog? We have a number of stories. Out of these stories, how many stories a team can select as part of sprint one? So how many stories? Because see, it is not a waterfall, right? In waterfall, all the stories you select or all the requirements you select, you do planning kind of. But here, first sprint, how many stories the team can plan? How many stories the team can select? In our product backlog, we have a number of stories. N could be 50, 70, 100. So out of those 70, 100 stories, how many stories a team can select as part of the sprint one? Can you answer this question? First, try to understand question. So we have n number of stories in the product backlog. We have n number of stories in the product backlog. So for these stories, we have a number of stories in the product backlog. Like so for these stories, like how many stories we can select as part of sprint one? Question one: who decides that? Who decides that? Question one: who decides that? Question two: how many? How many? Okay. So who decides that? So who decides that? How many? Okay, so we have different answers from Sushma, probably 5 to 10 stories, right? So product owner decides. Yeah. So very simple, guys. Okay. So for this, to answer this question, okay. So to answer this question only, we start with sprint planning meeting. So every new sprint starts with sprint planning meeting. Every new sprint starts with sprint planning meeting. So every new sprint starts with sprint planning meeting. So step number 4. So step number 4. So step number 4, sprint planning meeting. So step number 4, the event called sprint planning meeting. Every new sprint starts with 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 sprint planning meeting. So what is the purpose of sprint planning meeting? What is the purpose? So fourth point is sprint planning meeting. Every new sprint starts with sprint planning meeting. So few important points regarding sprint planning meeting. So what happens during the sprint planning meeting? Okay, so sprint planning meeting, entire team, that is Scrum development team. So Scrum development team includes your developers, testers, cross-functional team, we call it as operations team, all these people, comma, Scrum master, product owner, participates in sprint planning meeting. So sprint planning meeting, if you're working, if your sprint length is, okay, so if your sprint length is 2 weeks, then sprint planning meeting must be completed in maximum time allowed for sprint planning meeting must be completed in 4 hours. The sprint length is 2 weeks, then sprint planning meeting must be completed in 4 hours. So maximum time allowed for sprint planning meeting 4 hours. Maximum time allowed for sprint planning meeting 4 hours. So maximum time allowed for the sprint planning meeting 4 hours. Okay. So sprint length is 2 weeks. Then maximum for 4 weeks sprint up to 8 hours. For 4 weeks sprint up to 8 hours. Here, first product owner start explaining. Product owner start explaining rank 1 story. Product owner start explaining rank 1 user story to the team. So team clarifies their doubts. Team clarifies their doubts with the rank 1 user story. Team clarifies their doubts with rank 1 user story. And most important point, hold on your questions. So focus on the topic. And team decides complexity of the story. Based on the complexity, entire team assigns a value to express relative complexity. Which, so in story points. So they express relative complexity in story point. Story point is a new word. Here there are few topics like so planning, estimation, story points. These things we'll discuss later. Okay. So what you need to understand here. Rank 1 user story will be explained by the product owner. Scrum development team estimates. So Scrum development team estimates the user stories. So they estimate based on their their capacity, velocity. They do estimation. So that planning and estimation, if today is the first session for Scrum, I cannot directly go with the planning and estimation. So that planning and estimation I will be explaining you later. So first try to understand. So the team estimates. The team gives some estimation in terms of story point. So what happens here? Understand high level overview. What happens here? Scrum development team decides how many stories or how much work they can do within a sprint. Who decides it? Scrum development team, not product owner. Product owner decides order. Product owner decides in which order we have to plan. which order we have to plan. Product owner decides which order we have to plan. Product owner decides which order we have to plan. But who, I mean, so how much work a team can do? Who decides that? Scrum development team decides. So how many user stories per sprint we can do? That is not a static number. That changes based on the complexity of the stories we selected. So that changes. So how many stories we do in a sprint, that will be selected, planned during the sprint planning meeting. You may ask a question now, Ramana, why Scrum development team is deciding the planning and estimation? In waterfall model projects, project manager decides, team lead decides, architect decides. Here, why team is deciding? That nature is called self-organizing nature. That is the important characteristic of Agile methodology projects and Scrum projects. Self-organizing. So give a freedom to the Scrum development team. So they have to select their work, they have to plan their work, they have to commit what work they are doing, and they have to complete. So in Scrum projects, team involves in estimation. They are selecting how much work they can do within that sprint. So sprint planning purpose is you have n number of stories in the product backlog. Out of those stories, how many stories a team can deliver in the first sprint? So let's say first sprint backlog. So the outcome, so sprint planning meeting. So sprint planning meeting is conducted, and the sprint planning meeting outcome is sprint planning meeting outcome is. So sprint planning meeting outcome is number one. So deciding sprint goal. So here sprint goal. Number two, deciding sprint backlog. Deciding sprint backlog. Deciding sprint goal. Deciding the sprint backlog. So deciding the sprint goal, deciding the sprint backlog, and deciding the sprint plan. Deciding the sprint backlog, deciding the sprint goal, deciding the sprint plan. So Ramana, what exactly sprint goal, backlog, sprint plan? I will be covering in next session or Sunday session. So first understand, we are trying to discuss a Scrum in a high level. So step 4 is sprint planning meeting will be conducted by the team, and team participates in the sprint planning. Product owner, Scrum Master also attends, and the final outcome of the sprint planning meeting is sprint 1 backlog. We have sprint 1 backlog is ready. So what is sprint 1 backlog? Sprint 1 backlog contains list of user stories. So sprint 1 backlog contains list of user stories. So list of user stories. So sprint 1 backlog contains list of user stories committed by. So list of user stories committed by Scrum development team, selected by Scrum development team to deliver as increment end of the sprint, to deliver as increment end of the sprint as per definition of done. As per definition of done. Okay. So sprint 1 backlog, sprint planning meeting outcome is sprint 1 backlog meeting. So sprint planning meeting outcome is, so sprint planning meeting outcome is sprint 1 backlog. Sprint 1 backlog contains list of user stories committed by the Scrum development team to deliver as increment, end of the sprint, to deliver as increment end of the sprint. That is the sprint 1 backlog. Not only sprint 1 backlog, the team comes up with the sprint plan also. What is sprint plan? How to achieve, or how sprint plan contains implementation details. How to do implementation. So it contains implementation details. What sprint plan contains? Implementation details. So implementation details will be given in the sprint plan. That means, let's say if your team has selected story 1, so when development starts, when QA starts, so when production starts, or when operation starts. So a sprint plan also the team create. So Scrum development team decides how many stories they can do, and how they have to do. A plan will be created, an action plan will be created. So that is the fourth step. So just a quick recap. Okay, so what is the first step? Product owner decides. Product owner is a business representative who decides product backlog. Step two, the team, like once product backlog is ready, it contains ordered list of the requirements. Step three, so the product backlog items will be delivered in series of sprints. Sprint is a time box where we select the work, we select the requirements, and we plan, we develop, we test, and we deliver. So every sprint outcome is a working software, which is like agreed, which is working software, which is built as per the definition of done criteria agreed by the development team. And so every sprint, that is the third point. Every sprint starts with a sprint planning meeting. What is the purpose of sprint planning meeting? Selecting list of stories which a team can fit into one sprint, which team can deliver in one sprint. So that sprint planning meeting outcome is, so the sprint one backlog, the team selected sprint one backlog, and the sprint plan, how they sprint plan and action plan, which contains implementation details, which contains an action plan, which contains implementation details. So now sprint planning is over. So we got the sprint backlog. Once we got the sprint backlog, team starts working. Once we got the sprint backlog, team starts working as per the sprint plan. As per the sprint plan. Once the team starts working as per the sprint plan, Monday, 2 weeks sprint, for example, you are working, so just a second. So if you are working, for example, a 2 weeks sprint. So for example, if you are working in a 2 weeks sprint, then so team starts working as per the sprint plan. Okay, so Monday they start as per the sprint plan, development tasks or testing tasks. So they start working as per the sprint plan. Once, so once they starts working as per the sprint plan, here one important point, during the Scrum projects, Scrum strongly believes in three pillars. Those pillars are transparency, inspection, and adoption. Okay, so sprint backlog is ready. Then team starts, like the step 5 is every day to inspect their progress, towards the sprint goal. There is one more ceremony. Every day to inspect the sprint goal, there is one more ceremony called daily Scrum meeting. There is one more ceremony called daily Scrum or daily stand-up meeting. There is one more ceremony called daily Scrum. So daily Scrum meeting or stand-up meeting, it happens like so on an everyday basis. Like inspection. The purpose of the daily Scrum, inspecting progress of the sprint, towards sprint goal. So are we going towards, so inspecting the progress of the sprint towards the sprint goal? Like every day we have to, so because Scrum encourages frequent inspection. What do you mean by frequent inspection? We started with some sprint plan. So inspecting the progress of the sprint towards the sprint goal. So every team member responds to 3 basic questions to answer. What did you do since last 24 hours? Okay, so what did you do? So what are your plans for next 24 hours? And I mean, what you achieved. So what is your improvement to achieve something as per the sprint goal? So this every 24 hours. And do you see any blocking points? So daily Scrum objective is like so it's a frequent inspection of the progress of the team. So this has two objectives. One, transparency. So what others are doing, it is transparent to others. What everyone is doing, transparent to everyone. Okay, so we can inspect, are we in the right direction to complete the sprint? We can inspect, are we in the right direction to complete the sprint? So with this objective, daily team, entire team must participate. Entire team in the sense, this is for Scrum development team. This meeting is for Scrum development team, and Scrum Master facilitates. Tomorrow I'll be teaching you what are the responsibilities of the Scrum Master. Scrum Master role I will introduce tomorrow only. So daily Scrum meeting. So daily Scrum meeting purpose is giving transparency to others, inspecting the progress of the sprint, and if any adoption is required, okay, we are not progressing in the right direction. If any adoption is required, so doing changes to sprint plan, accordingly, or any blocking points are there, discuss with Scrum Master, and Scrum Master or management helps us in resolving those blocking points. So the fifth component is daily Scrum. So every day, entire team has to participate in daily Scrum meeting. That is fifth one. Like this, so daily the team starts progressing. They implement their development, testing, deployment tasks. They participate in the daily Scrum meeting, and once they reach the end of the sprint, like 10th day, end of the sprint. Once they reach the end of the sprint, then once they reach end of the sprint, they participate in a meeting called sixth point, sprint review meeting. So what is the purpose of the sprint review meeting? I will be explaining now. So what is the purpose of the sprint review meeting? I'll be explaining. So there was a question posted, I think. In DevOps engineer also involves in the stand-up meeting daily. Yes, Srinivas. If you are part of the Scrum development team, you have to involve. If you are part of the Scrum development team, you have to involve. All the team members who are part of the Scrum development team, developers, testers, operations engineer or DevOps engineer, they have to involve. Okay, so sprint review meeting. Okay, so sprint review meeting, like let's say we completed the sprint, we reached the last day of the sprint. So final day of the sprint, what happens? Final day of the sprint, what happens? So final day of the sprint, what happens? Sprint review meeting. So sprint review meeting, final day of the sprint. Okay, so product owners, stakeholders, end users or key users meet dev team, Scrum development team, Scrum team, and Scrum team gives demo. Gives demo on working software which they have built. So Scrum team gives demo on working software which they built. So this demo is not on the documentation. The demo will be given the real software, working software which they have built. The demo will be given. It's a this meeting gives an opportunity. This meeting gives an opportunity to development team to directly interact business, understand their feedback, their expectations, understand their feedback and their expectations. Okay, and business team to understand how development is going, how development is happening. Any adoptions they have to do. Any adoptions to backlog they have to do. Okay, so this meeting gives, this meeting happens nearly 2 hours kind of thing. It's an informal meeting, no need of PPTs and all. So stakeholders, you give demo to the working software to stakeholders, product owner. So they give us the feedback. So what they initially expected from us, is it working as per the definition of done or not? Are any missing items, any pending tasks? how to handle those pending tasks, either move it to product backlog or plan in the next sprints. Any changes, okay, any changes to definition of done criteria, we need to give more stringent definition of done. Adoption, new stories has to be added, stories can be removed, updated, reordered, reprioritized. Earlier the order was different, now reprioritize the order. So all these things will be discussed in the sprint review meeting. In the sprint review meeting. So sprint review meeting maximizes development team discussions with business team, where we get opportunity to showcase what we achieved and we explain what are the real problems we face. And business team explains, they share us the real genuine customer feedback. So are they happy with that, or what changes they want, what can be done in future. So this is the purpose of the sprint review meeting, which happens last day of the final day of the sprint. Once sprint review is done, then the last thing happens, sprint retrospective. So last thing happens, sprint retrospective. So sprint retrospective is one of the important ceremony in the, so sprint retrospective is one of the important key ceremony in the Scrum project. So sprint retrospective happens immediately after completion of the sprint review. Immediately after completion of the sprint review, retrospective happens. Immediately after completion of the sprint review, retrospective happens, and purpose of the sprint retrospective is purpose of the sprint retrospective is okay. So it is a open meeting within the Scrum development team. It is a open meeting within the Scrum development team. Scrum development team and Scrum Master. Only Scrum Master, Scrum development team are allowed. Generally, we won't encourage product owner, others to come and participate, project managers to come and participate in this meeting. It's an open meeting to discuss what went well. What went well with regard to process, people, and what went well. For example, okay, automation testing we are doing, so it was one of the best practice. It went well, so continue doing. What went wrong? So Docker implementation we failed, for example. So Docker implementation failed for deployment. So no, what went wrong? So something failed. So then stop doing and so start improving it. What could be improved? So what could be improved? Some kind of Jenkins, Docker implementation should be successful. So this is an open meeting to retrospect our own process, people, how, see, because Agile and Scrum strongly recommends continuous improvements. So this meeting provides opportunity for continuous improvement. So in Agile or Scrum never says you deliver excellent product in first sprint itself. Sprint by sprint, Agile maturity happens. Sprint by sprint, process improvement happens. Sprint by sprint, productivity increases. Okay, so that's why, so every retrospective meeting, it's a self retrospection. We retrospect, so know what went wrong, what could be improved. Based on that, so while planning the next sprint, so during this, I mean, as part of the sprint backlog, not only stories, in addition to stories, one action improvement also we plan. Every sprint, at least one action improvement, one process improvement you have to propose. So every sprint, one process improvement you have to propose. So once retrospective is done, then next sprint starts. In simple words, if you understand these 7 points, You can explain Scrum Framework to others in a simple words. So more detailed discussion on these 7 points I will be discussing in tomorrow's session. Okay, so just to summarize the discussion. So step 1, what is step 1? Product owner defines product backlog, which contains user stories. So which contains user stories. Step 2. Step 2. Product owner orders user stories as part of product backlog management. Step 3. Sprint is a time-boxed event where team performs. It starts with sprint planning, and so it ends with sprint retrospective. And it contains, during the sprint, it contains sprint implementation, development, testing, deployment, daily Scrum, sprint reviews. So these things happens. So every sprint outcome is a delivering working software as per definition of done criteria mentioned agreed by development team and business. Step 4. So sprint planning. Every new sprint starts with sprint planning. Every new sprint starts with sprint planning. And sprint planning objective is defining sprint backlog, sprint plan. How the team decides, they follow some techniques. So how, what I have not explained in this class. So they follow some kind of estimation techniques that will be covered in mostly Sunday class. So once sprint backlog is ready, team starts implementation. As per sprint plan, and daily meet during daily Scrum meeting to discuss progress of the sprint towards achieving the sprint goal. Step 6. End of the final day of the sprint, development team collaborates with business team to give demo on product increment. And step 4, so last step. So based on the business feedback, once we receive based on sprint review feedback, team participates in sprint retrospective to identify action improvements which helps for continuous process improvement. So these are the few steps, I can say 7 steps. So very simple to understand the Scrum. Okay, so I tried to explain end-to-end Scrum in a high level. So more detailed discussions happens tomorrow and after tomorrow. So Scrum overview. So high level Scrum procedure I try to explain in 7 steps. Okay, more detailed discussion. Tomorrow my main objective is so explaining you Scrum Master responsibilities. So I try to explain my level best to what is Scrum in just in 45 to 50 minutes. So tomorrow only can add details. Okay, thank you. Then have a nice day. So let's meet again tomorrow.
Thanks for watching. For more videos, subscribe our channel and click on bell icon.